What would you do if the whole world laughed at you for obeying God? If everyone turned their back on what's right, but you still chose to stand alone? This is the story of one man, one family, and a massive boat, built in faith while the storm of judgment gathered overhead. This is Noah's story. Long ago, the earth was full of people, but most had chosen a dark path. Violence filled the streets, greed ruled over hearts, and kindness had almost disappeared. The world that God had created with such care had become a place of pain and cruelty. People lied, cheated, and hurt one another without a second thought. They lived for themselves and forgot about the one who had given them breath. God's heart was broken as he watched the people he loved turn away from him. But in the middle of all this darkness, there was one man who still walked in the light. His name was Noah. He was honest, kind, and faithful to God, even though everyone around him had forgotten what was right. Noah didn't follow the crowd. He followed God's voice. While others laughed at truth and chose wrong, Noah quietly obeyed, teaching his children to do the same. God noticed Noah, and in a world where almost everyone had turned away, God found hope in the heart of this one man. Noah talked to God often. He didn't need a temple or a crowd. He would look up at the sky or out over the hills and speak to his Creator with an open heart. In return, God would guide Noah and give him peace even in the middle of a world that had lost its way. It was a special friendship built on trust and love. And because Noah walked closely with God, he could hear what others could not. One day, during his quiet time with God, Noah felt a deep stirring in his heart. God was about to do something big, something that would change the earth forever. But instead of fear, Noah felt calm. He knew that if God had something to say, it was for a good reason, and Noah was ready to listen. God told Noah something shocking. He was going to send a great flood to clean the earth of its wickedness. Everything that lived on the land would be swept away by the rising waters. But God wasn't going to destroy everything. He had a plan to save Noah, his family, and 2 of every kind of animal. And the way he would do it? By having Noah build a giant boat, a huge ark. It was a strange request. Noah had never built a boat before, especially not one this big. But he didn't argue or ask questions. He trusted God completely. If God said a flood was coming, Noah believed him. And if God said to build a boat, then Noah would build one, even if people laughed at him. God gave Noah detailed instructions on how to build the ark. It had to be long, wide, and tall enough to fit animals, food, and Noah's whole family. It needed 3 decks, a door on the side, and a window near the top. Every measurement was given carefully, and Noah paid attention to every word. Noah gathered his sons and explained what God had said. At first, they were quiet. A flood, a giant boat, saving animals. It all sounded unbelievable, but they had seen their father's faith over the years. If he believed this was what God wanted, they would stand with him. And so together they began the work. As the ark started to take shape, people from nearby towns came to watch. At first, they were curious. Then they began to laugh. "What are you building, Noah? A floating house? You think rain will wash us all away?" They mocked and jeered, but Noah didn't stop. He worked with steady hands and a steady heart. Every day, Noah and his sons cut wood, hammered beams, and followed God's blueprints. They worked in the sun, in the wind, and even in the silence of early mornings. The mockery continued, but Noah kept going. He knew something they didn't. God always keeps his promises. As the ark grew, Noah began preparing supplies. He stored grains, dried fruits, water, and other foods that could last a long time. His wife and daughters-in-law helped preserve food and pack them in jars and baskets. Everything had to be ready. Noah also built places inside the ark for animals to live comfortably, pens for sheep, stalls for cows, perches for birds. It was more than just a boat. It was a floating zoo and home. The ark became a place of preparation, a place of hope. Even though the skies were still clear, Noah trusted that the storm would come. Then one day, something amazing happened. Animals began arriving in pairs, just as God had said. Lions and lambs, rabbits and raccoons, birds and bugs, all walked, flew, or crawled toward the ark. People who had mocked Noah watched in shock as the creatures came peacefully and lined up to enter the ark. Noah didn't have to chase them or trap them. God had sent them. It was a silent miracle, one that spoke louder than words. Even now, God was showing mercy. The doors of the ark were still open. Anyone could still choose to believe. But most people just stood there, shaking their heads in disbelief. Before the door closed, Noah gave one last message. He stood on the ark and spoke with a heavy heart. "Please listen," he said. "A flood is coming. God told me. You've seen the animals arrive. You've seen the ark built with your own eyes. There is still time. You can come in." But the crowd just laughed louder. Some called him mad. Others said he was wasting his life. Only his family entered the ark. Noah watched the people walk away, and his heart broke. He wasn't trying to be right, he just wanted them to be safe. But their minds were set. When the last animal had entered and the final bag of grain was stored, something unexpected happened. The door to the ark began to move, but not by human hands. Slowly and powerfully, it shut on its own. God himself had closed it. Inside, the ark was quiet. Noah and his family sat together, waiting. The world outside continued as usual. People laughed, worked, and played. They thought Noah was gone for good. But the sky began to darken, and the wind began to howl. The time had come. It started as a drizzle. Then came the steady rain. The sky turned gray, then black. Lightning cracked through the heavens, and thunder boomed like a great drum. The ground soaked up the first drops, but soon puddles formed. Rivers rose. The people who had laughed before now looked up with worry. Rain poured from above, and water gushed up from the deep underground. The streets turned to streams, then rivers. The laughter outside the ark had stopped. Cries of panic began. Some people ran to high ground. Others beat on the ark's door, but it was too late. God had shut it. Day after day, the rain kept falling. 40 days and 40 nights. Water covered the fields, the hills, even the tallest trees. The highest mountain peaks disappeared beneath the waves. Every place that once felt safe was now underwater. But the ark floated gently on the surface. It was large and sturdy, just as God had instructed. Inside, Noah's family stayed dry and warm. The animals rested in their stalls. God kept his promise. The storm raged outside, but inside the ark, there was peace. Living on the ark was not easy. There were animals to feed, stalls to clean, and noise all day and night. But everyone worked together. Noah's sons helped care for the larger animals. The women prepared meals and kept the living quarters clean. Even though it was crowded and sometimes smelly, there was peace. They were safe. God was with them. And while the world outside had fallen silent, the ark was filled with life and hope. Every sunrise reminded them that they were part of something greater, God's rescue plan. For weeks, the ark had sailed through endless waves, carried by the great flood that covered the earth. The once bustling world was now silent. No more cities, no more people, just the steady rhythm of rain and waves. Inside the ark, Noah and his family kept busy with their duties. They fed the animals, repaired small parts of the ark, and prayed for the end of the storm. But as the days passed, Noah began to wonder, how long would this last? Had the earth ever experienced anything like this? Noah believed that God had a plan, but even the calmest hearts can grow weary with waiting. Then, after what seemed like an eternity, The rain finally stopped. The skies began to clear, and the sun peeked through the clouds for the first time in what felt like ages. Noah's heart lifted with hope, but he still wasn't sure if the waters had gone down completely. The earth was still covered in deep water, and the ark continued to float on the surface, bobbing gently like a small boat. God had promised Noah that he would see the earth again. It was time to test the waters. Noah sent out a raven first, hoping it would find dry land. The raven flew back and forth, but it didn't return to the ark. Next, Noah sent out a dove, a gentler bird that would be more likely to return if it found no place to rest. The dove flew off into the vast, empty sky. Noah waited anxiously, hoping for a sign. Hours passed and the dove came back to the ark, tired and alone. It had found no place to land. Noah's heart sank, but he knew that God had everything under control. The next day, he sent the dove out again. This time, the dove came back with a freshly plucked olive leaf in its beak. Noah's heart leapt with joy. The earth was recovering. There was hope. The dove had found a sign of life, a new beginning. Noah now knew that the floodwaters were receding, and the land would soon be ready for them to return. Noah waited for the right moment. The dove had brought back a sign of new life, and the ark was no longer surrounded by endless water. The time had come for Noah and his family to step out into the world again. But first, they had to trust in God's timing. As Noah watched the horizon, a sense of peace filled his heart. The rain had stopped, the waters had receded, and the earth was ready to receive life once again. But Noah knew that this was not just a new beginning for him and his family. It was a new beginning for the entire world. The flood had washed away the wickedness that had spread across the earth, leaving behind a clean slate. God spoke to Noah, telling him that it was time for him and his family to leave the ark. Noah had waited for this moment with hope, but now that it was here, he felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. What would the earth be like now? Would it be a place of peace, or would old ways rise up again? Noah's family stepped out of the ark onto the dry ground. They were the only humans left alive on earth, and as they looked around, they saw a world that was both familiar and different. The earth was quiet, the air fresh, and the ground solid under their feet. The ark had protected them, but now they would have to live in this new world. Noah's heart was full of gratitude. As he looked up at the sky, he thanked God for bringing them safely through the flood. And then God did something unexpected. He made a promise to Noah, to his family, and to all of creation. "I will never again destroy the earth with a flood," God said. "As a sign of this promise, I give you a rainbow in the sky. Whenever you see it, remember my promise." The rainbow stretched across the sky in brilliant colors, a beautiful reminder of God's faithfulness. It was a symbol of hope, a sign that even after the greatest storm, God's love and promises would remain. Noah and his family built an altar to honor God, offering sacrifices of thanksgiving. They prayed together, grateful for the new world they were about to enter and the new chance to live in peace with God and each other. The earth had been reborn, and Noah and his family stood at the beginning of a new world. Everything felt fresh, new, and full of possibility. The sun shone brightly, the air was crisp, and the land was fertile. It was a time for planting, rebuilding, and starting over. But Noah knew that though the flood had cleansed the earth, it could not change the hearts of men. He knew the temptation to sin would always be present, and he prayed that his family would remain faithful to God's ways. As they settled into their new life, Noah and his sons began to plant crops and build homes. They raised animals, tilled the soil, and worked hard to restore the earth to its beauty. Noah's wife and daughters-in-law helped with the cooking and caring for the animals. It was a life of simple, honest work, and each day brought new challenges. Yet, It was a good life, a life of peace and gratitude. Noah could see the changes in the earth, but he also saw changes in his family. The years of living in the ark had brought them closer together. They had learned to rely on one another and on God. Now they were beginning to see the beauty of the world again, a world that God had entrusted to them. One day, Noah planted a vineyard. He carefully tended to the vines, and after several years they grew and began to produce grapes. The vines were strong and the fruit was sweet. Noah was pleased with the results of his hard work. He had something to celebrate, and as he harvested the grapes, he decided to make wine from them. Noah enjoyed a cup of wine, feeling a sense of peace and contentment. But the joy of this new beginning was short-lived. After drinking too much, Noah became drunk and lay down in his tent, unaware of his actions. The peaceful, restored world he had hoped for was still full of human weakness and sin. Even Noah, a man chosen by God, was not immune to temptation. Noah's sons saw their father lying in his drunken state, and one of them, Ham, made a terrible mistake. Instead of covering his father with respect, Ham mocked Noah and went to tell his brothers. Shem and Japheth, the other two sons, immediately took a garment, walked backward into the tent, and covered their father without looking at him. They showed honor and love for their father, while Ham's actions dishonored him. When Noah woke up and realized what had happened, he was filled with sorrow. He knew that the world was still affected by sin, and that even the most faithful could fall short. Noah prayed to God for his family and for strength to continue on the path of righteousness. But he also made a solemn promise to himself. He would raise his family to be different. They would live in honor of God and each other. The flood had passed, the earth had dried, a new beginning had dawned. But even in a fresh world, the hearts of men still wrestled with right and wrong. Noah, the faithful servant, had done his part. He obeyed God when no one else would, and through him, life continued. God's promise, painted in the sky, reminded Noah, and reminds us, that even in judgment, God is merciful. Even in failure, he gives us second chances. As Noah's family grew and spread across the land, so did the story of the ark, passed down from generation to generation. A story of obedience, faith, and hope, that even the greatest storms can be survived when we walk with God. And so the journey ends, or perhaps it has just begun.